Nation's mental health experts are calling on politicians and the media to adopt respectful and inclusive language during the election campaign. Experts and community leaders say negative impacts from the 2023 Voice to Parliament debate increased psychological distress for many First Nations people and revealed a need for improved support and services. Director of First Nations Strategy at the Black Dog Institute, Dr. Clinton Schultz, says politicians need to foster unity rather than cause division.
What we're really calling for is the whole debate, the discourse around First Nations affairs, particularly in the social emotional wellbeing space, to be undertaken in a respectful way that has social emotional wellbeing of us as First Nations peoples at the forefront and is respectful of the impact that discourse can actually have on our state, our psychological state, and on our overall social emotional wellbeing.
What does that look like in practical terms?
Yes, I think we've come up with a set of very clear guidelines. It's 5 points that we're asking people to familiarise themselves with. That's set the standard for a respectful debate. So ensure that we're undertaking the discourse in a respectful way. Secondly, to promote truth and honesty. So to ensure that we're not inflaming news that can, one, increase discrimination towards Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people or is incorrect in the first place. Prioritising our wellbeing, so ensuring that we're always thinking about what is the impact of this discourse on those that we're actually talking about, and in this case, that's us as First Nations peoples. We really want people to be mindful about fostering unity rather than trying to cause division, and we want politicians who have a very high level of influence to lead by example.
Have you seen or heard anything, Clinton, in either from politicians or in the media in this last 2 weeks of this really focused part of the campaign that has caused you to question what's going on there?
I think this has been quite a different start to an election campaign. Generally, we see that Aboriginal affairs is a bit of a political football when we come into a election campaign, but I think there's been other global and national issues that have kind of taken priority at present. But I would suggest that the focus on Indigenous affairs will come. I'd also suggest that there is certain parties out there, not political parties as such, but there is other parties that are affiliated with political parties that have been speaking in ways that I wouldn't consider to be fully respectful of the social emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples during this campaign. And there has been media organisations that have picked up those stories and really run with them.
What is the risk of harm to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people?
So we've had some really good research come out of ANU since the referendum, really looking at some of the impacts that the referendum had on social emotional wellbeing of First Nations peoples. And we know a lot of the changes were driven by the discourse around the voice referendum as a whole. And what we've seen was there's been an increase in the experiences of racism and discrimination for First Nations peoples. And at the same time, there's been a decrease in people's reported experiences of stable social and emotional wellbeing.
We spoke, Clinton, right throughout the referendum in 2023, and at the end there was an experience that you shared with me about one of your sons that really resonated and reflected some of, I think, the concerns that you're mentioning now, but also experiences that I was hearing from across the board. Since then, what have you been seeing and hearing from other First Nations people?
Yeah, both personal experience and what I hear in the work that I do as a psychologist and somebody that's in community all the time is that people are definitely experiencing more overt forms of racism. So I think what occurred during the referendum was, and post that, and with things that have happened globally, with, I guess, the Trump effect as well, is people have felt that they have the right to voice their opinions or their positions on certain issues in ways that don't have to be mindful of the impact that those actually have on different groups of peoples. And I think we've seen many minority groups in different countries at present who are feeling this impact on their social emotional wellbeing, and we're definitely witnessing that here in Australia.
And what's been your observation, Clinton, of what we've seen from a policy arena since the referendum? Because there have been many people saying that we've seen the political parties retreat from a rights-based agenda, and that we've also seen that in some parts of society, particularly around some business groups and sporting groups that have really stepped back from the work that they were doing before the referendum.
I think that's correct. I think we have seen people take a much more candid approach to First Nations issues and affairs. I'd almost suggest that at times it's been silenced now. So I think we had so much attention and focus on it leading up to and just post the referendum. And I'd suggest that, for a large period between the end of the referendum and now, there's almost been a silencing of First Nations issues. We have seen, of course, we've seen at different times, different people through the media or within politics who have come forward and have put their views forward on what they think the greatest issues are and what they feel needs to be done to rectify some of those concerns. What I would suggest is that we haven't seen the engagement with communities that we need to have to ensure that we are identifying what's happening at grassroots levels and ensuring that we are prepared to actually action the opportunities and resources we have to respond to those localised needs.
And in terms of this election campaign, Dr. Clinton Schultz, have you seen anything that gives you a sense that the political parties are pushing forward with an agenda about rights for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people?
Yeah, as I just mentioned, I think there's almost been a silencing so far in this election campaign of Indigenous issues, and I think they have to come and they will come. So I think we're yet to see where each of the parties really does stand in terms of Aboriginal affairs as we move through this election campaign. I just hope that as we move into discussing these issues, that we do it in a way that's respectful and mindful of the social emotional well-being of us as First Nations peoples.
And in just the last couple of days, the Prime Minister has ruled out legislating a voice to Parliament, which was one of the calls, before by some members of the community and then after the referendum. We also heard during the referendum the opposition saying that they wanted, at that point, another referendum on simply enshrining Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution, but they seem to have walked back from that as well. In terms of policy in this election, really what we've seen is a focus from the government on close the gap and spending in the budget and then subsequently. And from the opposition, calls that there would be an audit and a review of spending among a piece of work on that front. What does that all say to you?
Yeah, look, I've got no problem with audits occurring, but if we're going to conduct audits, I think they have to be a fair and transparent process, and they should happen across all jurisdictions and across all portfolios. I don't think that we should just be pointing the finger at what's occurring in terms of First Nations affairs. So that's what I'd say about that part of it. In terms of, the different versions of the voice, be it going to another referendum, be it, being legislated, I think what we need to get to is a position where we are prepared as a nation and we are mature enough as a nation to go, when are we going to allow First Nations peoples to just have the say on what they feel is in their best interests and put forward what they feel is going to help to move their social emotional well-being forward in a positive way, and then as a nation, as governments, what is it that we can do to help operationalise that? So I think we need to get to a position where we go beyond allowing Australia as a whole to determine what is in our best interests and get to a more mature position where we are asking First Nations peoples to determine for themselves, and we are allowing our systems to then accommodate for that.
And just finally, what would you say to politicians who might be listening to you right now about the pathway to do just that?
I think the best way for us to move towards that is we need to be prepared to, one, listen and respectfully listen, and two, to relinquish control. At the end of the day, we are First Nations peoples who never ceded sovereignty in this country. We want the right to be self-determined and to determine for ourselves within that what is in our best interests moving forward into our futures for our children and our grandchildren.
Dr. Clinton Schultz, Director of First Nations Strategy at Black Dog Institute. Thank you so much for your company this morning.
Gavin Indu.